Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Cito. I am the Strategic Volunteer Engagement Director at Trident United Way. I want to thank you for joining us this morning on what's going to be a really engaging and informative Ask the Expert webinar series. But before we get started, just a few things to go over with you. So we're really excited to have Finisha Bennett with Stony Landing Solutions join us for a virtual interview skills webinar session. She has a vast background and experience in the HR profession and is going to share a lot of great information, whether you're hearing it for the first time, whether it may be a reminder for you when you're getting ready to interview, or even if you're seasoned and just want a refresher on what is going to make a virtual interview that much more successful for you. So before we turn it over to Finisha, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items since we're in this virtual space these days. Since Finisha is going to ask some questions of you and share a lot of great examples, we ask you to try to avoid multitasking, which we know can be difficult when you have many other things going on at the same time. But there's going to be a lot of great information shared, which we are recording today's session, but again, we want you to get the most out of today's session and want you to be able to ask any questions that you may have of Finisha. Please feel free to use the question box in your webinar menu, your side panel there, to submit your questions. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. And then, as I mentioned, we are recording today's session and we'll share the link to the recording afterwards. So should you want to go back and listen again to any of this information. So real quickly, in case you are new to Trident United Way, or this is your first experience with our organization, we are a nonprofit community organization with the vision of being the leader in uniting our community to improve lives. In order to do that, we feel it's important to focus on 3 impact areas of education to prepare children for future success, health by creating a healthier Tri-County, and financial stability of helping people work and be financially stable. We feel we cannot address one without addressing all 3 to ensure that people have every opportunity to improve their lives. So with that, today's discussion, as I mentioned, Finisha will first kind of walk us through preparing for a virtual interview, some examples of virtual interviews or types of interviews, and then we'll have a question and answer session. So if you give us 1 second, I'm going to turn it over to Finisha so she can share her presentation with you all. Finisha, I'm giving it to you now.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Hope you all are doing well today. I'm gonna just get my screen ready. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for the opportunity from Trident United Way just to share this information. I'm hopeful that this will be something that will be very beneficial to anyone that's participating this morning. And I'm very excited just to share this information with you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Everybody can see my screen. Amanda, can you see it?
We can.
Okay. And you can hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay. So let's get started. I know right now in our world, things may seem very dark. Things may seem difficult. We may be dealing with a lot, but I am very hopeful that once we get through the trouble that we're currently going through, that on the other side, there will be lots of opportunities. And I've always kind of wanted to prepare myself for when opportunity presented itself, that I would be ready for it. So I'm hopeful that a couple things will happen from you being a part of this webinar today. One being that you will be able to get information about how the process works for applying for jobs, interviewing virtually, and also that you will be more confident. So I'm sure maybe you've been on an interview before, and it is nerve-wracking for anyone. But I want you to use this information to help you as you prepare for those situations so that you can be more confident in how you present yourself and how you actually are on that interview. So I have a little agenda here. What we will start talking about is getting the interview. I kind of felt when I was putting the information together that I couldn't really talk about the virtual interview without starting at getting the interview and some of the things that you need to understand as far as the process. Once we talk about that, we will then move on to the pre-interview workout. So what you need to be doing to get yourself ready once they give you that call and say, we want you to come in for an interview. And then we'll talk about the types of interviews that you may encounter. Then we'll follow up with the virtual interview and how you need to get yourself ready for that and what to expect. And then lastly, we'll talk about the follow-up, what needs to happen after the interview. All right, so let's jump right into it. Getting the interview. So your present situation is not your final destination. The best is yet to come. That's a quote by Zig Ziglar. And I like that quote because it kind of puts things in perspective. A lot of times we will look at our current situation and we will be depressed or be down about it, but we have to be hopeful about what's going to be on the other side of that. And I want you to have the mindset of, I'm going to get myself prepared and do what I need to do. So if there's a job I want to aspire to, if there's a career change that I'm wanting, that I'm going to be prepared when that opportunity comes. So getting the interview. There are a lot of things happening behind the scenes when you are applying for jobs. About 20 years ago, if you had a resume and you applied for a job, your chances of actually going in for an interview would probably be very high. Now, with technologies and the things that HR departments are doing and companies are doing, as far as how they streamline who they bring in for interviews, it becomes more difficult to get that interview. And what I mean by that is if you have a completed resume, and I do this all the time, but I will use the word resume and application. It means the same thing. So if I say resume, I'm also talking about applications. But if you have a resume and you see a job posting that you like and you submit that resume for that job posting, your chances of actually getting that interview becomes a little bit more difficult. And the reason why is a lot of companies use what's called the ATS, which is an applicant tracking system. It's an applicant tracking system. And what happens is as you apply for that job, you don't necessarily know, but that employer has things set up behind the scenes to say, we want, if it's something like a customer service representative, we want a customer service representative with 2 years of experience. We want them to be detail oriented. We want them to be a team player. So as you apply for that job and you submit that resume, and that resume doesn't show that you have those things, you don't have those keywords like detail oriented, teamwork in that resume, your resume is not going to go maybe at the top of the list. Doesn't mean that they're not going to look at it, but that applicant tracking system is streamlining it for the employer so that if they have so many applications, they can have a list of those that are meeting what they have set up behind the scene. I hope that makes sense and I'm not confusing you, but we can definitely talk about it more when we get to the question and answer period. So what is important out of what I'm trying to give the information I'm giving to you is when you see a job posting, you need to make sure that you are going over your resume, you're going over that job posting, and you have detailed information from that job posting in your resume. And like I said, we can talk about that more when we do the question and answers. So the applicant tracking system is very important, and it's very important that you know what the employer is actually looking for. And then keep in mind that if you listen today to this webinar, you do everything that you're supposed to do to get the interview, you do everything during the virtual interview that you should do. And if you don't get that job, your mindset shouldn't be that, hey, I wasn't good enough. Employers are looking for a particular person when they are hiring for positions. And think of it as a relationship. When you're looking for a mate, you just don't walk down the street and say, "Oh, that looks like a good mate. I think I'll marry them." No, you want to know information about them. You want to know about their family. You want to know where they grew up, where they went to school before you get into that relationship. So your interview process, your application process is the same thing. The employer is trying to understand who you are, what type of employee you will be before they enter into a relationship with you. So keep that in mind. So sometimes you may have the education, you may have the experience, but maybe based off of the interview, or maybe based off of what they perceive your characteristics to be, you may not be a good fit for the culture of that company. So don't beat yourself up so much if you do have an interview and you don't actually get that job. Use that experience for the next interview and be better and just continue to grow as a person. All right, let's move on. The pre-interview workout. So before anything else, preparation is key to success. Alexander Graham Bell. So if you are called by the employer and they say, we want you to come, or we want to set up a virtual interview on Zoom with you for Friday at 1 o'clock, they tell you who you may be interviewing with, and they actually tell you, what to expect during that interview. If you just go to that virtual interview and do no preparation, you're not going to ace that interview. The person that's going to ace that interview is the one that's going to do some preparation beforehand. So once you know that you have the interview, you need to do some research. You should start with the company, and a great place to start would be on their website. You're going to get a lot of information. Again, I'm going to go back to the example I'm using as a relationship. If you're wanting to start a relationship with this company, you want to know what their mission is, what values do they have. One of the things I always look for is what kind of charitable events do they promote, or do they donate to. I want to know what kind of charities that they actually help out in the community. I want to know who's the CEO, who is on the executive team. A lot of companies now, because of the environment and the climate of the world, have a lot of diversity statements in their job postings. So I want to know what kind of diversity do they have at the company. Those are all things that you can probably get from their website. You may also be able to Google the company's name and maybe find a news article. So that's something else you can do. You also want to research the job. You want to maybe network with someone that you know that works there. If you don't know someone that works there, maybe go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great source in order to find out, maybe you don't know someone directly, but maybe one of your friends on LinkedIn is a friend that has a friend that works there, and you can ask them to introduce you. You can also try to research the job by going to Google and YouTube and research similar jobs, and maybe you can find information that way. I would also tell you that you would want to research or go through that job description again. Every time that I would apply for positions, I would either do one or two things. I would print out the job description, or I would actually save it on my computer, so that if they called me, I would be able to go back to that job description to see exactly what they were looking for. And I would go through it. If there was anything on that job description that I didn't know For example, let's say if there was a software program that they use that I was not familiar with, I would look up the software on Google. Usually the company of the software provider has a video, something on YouTube. So I would learn about it so that if I was asked that question during the interview, I would be able to say, no, I don't have experience using that system, but I have experience using a similar system. And I was able to learn that from my previous job. That way I present myself as somebody that has done their research. They maybe don't know the information, but they're willing to learn it. So make sure you do that. And there should be nothing on that job description that you don't try to find out about if you're not familiar or you don't have experience with. And then I also would research the interviewer. So if I knew the interviewer's name, I would maybe look them up on LinkedIn, look to see like maybe if they started as started in an entry level position, if they moved up in the company, looked at what other jobs they had, their background. I would not stalk the person, wouldn't go to all their social media pages like Facebook and Instagram, but just try to find out something about the interviewer, especially if I knew that that person would be like the supervisor that I would be working for. And then you want to also practice your interview. So if you are not sure what kind of questions may be asked of you, again, Google. Google is your best friend. Google, if it's a customer service position, just Google, tell me customer service position questions that I may be asked during the interview. And you will find a ton of questions. Go through those questions by yourself, go through the questions with a friend or a family member, and just practice. We all know that practice makes perfect. So the more that you do it, the more comfortable you will become and the more confident you will become. And then lastly, we want to prepare a list of questions for the employer. You always want to have questions to ask the employer. Again, it's going to show that you did your research. It's going to show how engaged you are and how much you want the position. And if you don't actually, maybe during the interview process, they actually answer all the questions that you have written down. One question that I always like to ask the interviewer is, what makes you come to work every day? What makes you stay at this company? Because that question is going to give you a lot of information about the culture of the company. So if you forget what to ask or you don't have anything to ask, that's always like a go-to question that I would use during the process. So now that you have done all the pre-work, now we want to just talk a little bit about what to expect during that interview. So this virtual interview that you're going to have, it can be with just one person, so like a one-to-one interview, or you could have a panel. A panel makes it a little difficult because in most cases you're going to have your camera on, they're going to be able to see you, you can see them. In most cases, you might have like 2 to 4 people on the panel, and they may be asking you different questions. Of course, they will be writing it down because they just want to keep track of your answers as they interview you. Situational questions is one type that they will ask you, but in most cases, most interviews will have a combination of maybe the situation and the behavioral. Sometimes they will also throw a case question in there as well. So the situational questions are questions that they're asking you just to see how you would handle a situation that may arise in the job that you're interviewing for. So let's say you're applying for a customer service representative position and they ask you, how would you handle a dissatisfied customer? Or they may ask you, if you have a situation where you have a team member and you know that team member is doing something unethical, how would you handle that situation? So those are hypothetical questions that they're just asking to see what type of characteristics that you may have if you are hired for the job. With behavioral questions, they're going to ask you questions related to your experience. So they may ask you a question. They may look at your resume if they have that in front of them, and they may say, "I see that you worked at Verizon for 2 years as a customer service representative. Tell us about a time where you had to um, you had to give a presentation, or tell us about a time where you had to explain something that was complex to a customer." And so you would go through and tell them about your experience and tell them how you handle that situation. Those are behavioral questions that are going to tell them how you handled things in the past. And they're going to use the situation in the behavioral questions to kind of predict what kind of employee that you may be. Now, most people will think, and most employers will think, based on your past experience, that's how you will be as an employee with their company. So you want to present to them good examples of your great behavior as an employee, and you want to make sure that it's portrayed in the answers that you're giving. The case question is a little different. Those are the ones that I really I like. So they can be assessments that you are giving during the interview, or some people may actually give them to you. They may ask you questions and then afterwards give you like a case question for you to complete on your own. So those could be where they maybe give you, let's say, a paragraph of like an exercise. They give you a paragraph of different tasks that you would do in this job that you're interviewing for, and then tell you to prioritize from 1 to 5 what's the most important thing that you need to complete. Or they may ask you to do a demonstration of something. So if you are applying for a job and you're going to use Excel a lot in the job, they may give you an exercise where you actually have to get on the computer and you have to complete this Excel exercise. Okay, so those are the different types of questions that you may be given. And like I said, most employers are going to use a combination of those questions. So you may get situational behavior, you might even get a case question. So be prepared to answer questions that are similar to that kind. And you can also, again, Google situational behavioral case question to give yourself examples of what type of questions they are, so that you can feel more confident when you're actually in the interview. So this is a slide that I wanted to throw in just to let you know about this type of technology. It's an interview that I actually had to do. This is one of the companies that actually provide this service to employers. The company is Spark Hire. You can definitely go to their website and watch their video to kind of see what happens when you are required to do this type of interview. So I'll tell you a little bit about my experience. So I was interviewing for a position, and I submitted my application, and then I got an email from the employer saying that I was selected for an interview, and I had a week to complete the interview. And I needed to click on a link, and I would be doing a virtual interview. This virtual interview is basically recorded questions from the company, and I had to record myself answering the questions, which no problem, not a big deal. It was a little bit intimidating because there's no immediate feedback from anybody. I'm just recording my answer. I had 3 minutes to answer each question, and I was not able to stop once I started talking, and I was not able to delete and start over. So that made it a little bit more nerve-wracking for me. So as you can see on the screen, the question here is, what makes you stand out from other candidates for this role? They were very, very, very basic questions. There were, I think, only 3, maybe 5 of them. And I was able to submit the questions after I did all the recordings. What I did to prepare for this was I would listen to the question. Maybe sometimes I would listen twice. I would think about what I wanted to say, and then I would say it out loud, and then I would hit the record button and record my answer. So I think that helped me to just like not have to think off the top of my head. I was a little bit more prepared. And you can take as long as you want during the process, but you only have 3 minutes to answer the question. So I think a lot of employers, especially during the times that we're in right now, will be probably going to this type of technology. So I just wanted to mention it, let you know that that's something that is probably going to be seen a lot in the future. All right. So now it's time for the actual virtual interview. You got this. You're prepared. You're confident. You're ready to go. So what do we need to do? So one, you need to set the scene. You need to make sure that wherever you're going to be interviewing at, that is not a distractive environment, that it's going to be isolated. If you have, excuse me, if you have family, that the family knows what's going on, so nobody's walking in the room while you're in the middle of your interview. Your lighting, your camera position, your microphone, all of that is checked ahead of time. You also want to make sure your tone is loud enough for everyone to hear you. You don't want to mumble. You want to make sure you're clear. You're going to make sure that they're able to see you. So if you don't have the correct lighting in the room that you're in, maybe you need to bring an additional lamp in the room. One of the things I would do, I used to take online classes, and I would always sit by a window that had curtains. So the background was just a plain, plain curtain, nothing too distractive. You also want to make sure not only that the family knows, if you have roommates, the roommate knows, the kids know, but you also want to make sure that if you have animals, you actually put the animals up or put them somewhere where maybe they're not going to be loud or make noise. I'm thinking like this morning, I was a little worried because my neighbor's house, she has dogs that move throughout the house in the day. And if a loud truck comes, the dogs start barking and they're loud. It sounds like they're in my house. But in a situation like that, you would apologize, let them know, that's not my animal, that's the neighbor's dog, because that's something that you can't control. So just explain that to the interviewer. So if you look at this picture, I think it's a great example. So that's why I put it here. He has a great background. He has the curtain in the back. He actually has a plant in the back. So he's doing a great job. But he has on his jacket, his dress shirt, his tie with his pajama pants, no shoes on. He actually has the laptop sitting on a high chair. So no one can see what's going on behind the laptop. We just want to make sure that in front of the camera that we're going to give them a professional environment when they're looking at you. We don't want to distract them. And then you don't want to be distracted because you're already going to be a little bit nervous. Okay. So what to wear, how to dress. It is very important that you take this seriously when you're virtually interviewing, just like if you were walking into an interview in a building. If you would normally wear a dress shirt, a tie, a dress, a blazer, then that's what you should actually wear for this virtual interview. If you are actually interviewing with an employer that has a dress code where they dress down, where they normally wear, like, let's say polo shirts and jeans every day, that's fine. Then a polo shirt will probably be okay. There would probably be no problem with that. The way that you're going to know that is by doing your research. So when you do your research about the company online on their website, a lot of companies will have their dress code listed on the website, or you can maybe tell from pictures of employees in the environment. So you're going to have to figure that one out, but you're going to know based on your research. And again, if you talk to someone that works there, it's better to be overdressed than to be underdressed. So we're not going to wear like anything that's like going to look like pajamas or lounge clothes, or when we present ourselves, we want to make sure like we don't have on like a wrinkled shirt or anything like that. just make sure that however you would present yourself if you were going to an office environment to interview is how you're going to present yourself for this virtual interview, even though you're going to be at home. Okay. Okay. So technology, I think technology is probably the biggest issue or problem that most people have. I would suggest that if you're not good with technology, that you get either a family member, a niece, a nephew, a grandchild, whoever you can find in your family that is good with it, because there is somebody in the family that usually is. And you're going to ask them to help you make sure that you understand and that you get set up. You can do this beforehand to practice, or you can do it on the day of. So I would say I'm very familiar with Zoom. That was the platform that I use for schooling. That's the platform that I use with my virtual trainer when I work out. And it's also the platform I use at church. So Zoom is the one that I particularly like. I'm very familiar with that one. But if I was using like Skype or something else that I wasn't familiar with, what I would do is I would go to Google or I would go to YouTube and I would go and just research the platform, see how it works, see how the panel works, see how the tools that they have work. So I would be more comfortable with using it. And then sometimes some platforms require you to actually download something ahead of time. So it would be beneficial for you if you would start preparing maybe an hour ahead of time. If they sent you a link and you click on the link and maybe it has to download something on your computer, it would be good if you did that beforehand so that you're not late for the interview. And then also Wi-Fi. So if your house is anything like my house, I was telling Amanda I had to go and tell the teenager to get off of the Xbox so that we don't get slowed down today. Make sure you have something in place just in case the Wi-Fi, there's something wrong with the Wi-Fi or something happens. In my case, I have a hotspot on my cell phone, so if something were to happen to the Wi-Fi, I can use that. If you have a neighbor that maybe you can use their Wi-Fi, would be another example of having a backup plan. Just make sure you've gone through all the things that you need to in order to make sure you're set for no technology issues. And I would always, always, always do a test run. So do a test run with a family member where you actually get on Zoom. Zoom is one of the platforms that you can get on for free. On WebEx and GoToMeetings, maybe not. But again, if you YouTube and you do your research, you'll be more comfortable actually using those platforms than if you're doing it for the first time on the day of the interview. All right. So we're getting to the end, and I'm excited because I'm hoping that you have some great questions. So as you are sitting and you're going through this interview and it's virtual, you're trying to make a connection with someone, but you're trying to do it through the computer. So you still want to have great eye contact. You want to look at your camera. You want to make sure your eyes are not wandering around the room. If you have something like Zoom where you have a picture of yourself and then you have a larger picture of the person you're talking to, you want to make sure that you're not focusing in on the picture of yourself. You want to look directly at that camera so that they know that you have great eye contact, you're focused, you're engaged, and you're interested in what is being said and what's being talked about, and you're not distracted by what's maybe going on in your house. You also want to have great body language. I tend to talk with my hands a lot, so if y'all hear noise, that's me trying to try to keep my hands together because I talk with my hands a lot. So that's something, if I was doing a virtual interview, I would try to keep my hands below the camera so it's not showing so much of my hands flying in front of my face, so that they can clearly see me talking and they can clearly see me engaging with them. Try to show that you're enjoying the interview, which is hard because you're nervous, but try to show that you're engaged in this process and you're interested in what they have to offer and what they have to share with you about this and about this company. So try to smile, try to show that you're not like the middle picture here where the guy his arms are folded. That's not a good sign. You want to make sure that you're showing that you're engaged and you're excited and happy to have the opportunity to interview with them. All right, congratulations. You have completed this virtual interview process. It was a lot of work, but anything worth having is worth doing the work for. So you've completed the virtual interview. So now what? I would always send a follow-up thank you letter to the company. If you can send it directly to the person you supervise with, if you have their information, that's great. If not, normally most companies will have a generic email address for the HR department, the human resource department. Then send it to that email address, and they should normally share it with the supervisor or who you interviewed with. So send it by email. It would be the best thing because some employers actually will have a decision within a couple of days. If you want to send it by mail, you can, but sending it by email probably will be the best thing. And then always ask them if they will know when a decision will be made. You don't want to be sitting around trying to guess when they're going to call, if they will call. So doing the interview, if you remember, ask them when a decision will be made if they don't tell you. And if you don't remember during that time, when you send your email as a follow-up, as a thank you, ask them when they would have a decision about the position. That way you're not just sitting around waiting for them to call. All right, so I did that in record time. What questions can we answer for you today about the process, about virtual interviewing, about any of the interviewing information that we shared?
Thank you, Finisha. We do have a couple questions, and the first one is, what cues can you look for from the interviewer to make sure that you're answering the questions correctly, or that you understood what their question was?
Okay, that's a very good question. One of the things that I would always do is before the interview started, I would let them know that I would write down maybe a question. I would write down the question if it's a long question, just to make sure that I'm answering them correctly. And the reason why I do that is because I want to make sure that I am touching every subject that the interviewer is asking me. And then I would just I don't get so involved in their feedback, because most interviewers, if they've been trained, they've been taught not to really have too much of a reaction. So I become confident in my answers because I've practiced, because I've researched the job description, because I've gone through and done the pre-work, and I'm just confident in my answers because, like I said, if they have been trained, most people are trained not to really have a reaction to every question, not to say, a lot of people will say, oh, that's a good question, that's a great answer. But in HR, we're trained that you don't want to give people false hope. You don't want to act like they're going to get the job because you have other people to interview. So you don't know if they're going to get the job or not. So I would say not to get so caught up in their reaction, because they're probably going to have a poker face reaction to everything because of the fact that they don't want to give you false hope about it. And they just want to make sure that they're writing down and they can go back to those questions. But most people will, shake their head, they will nod, they was like, oh, that's a good answer, or something like that. If they're not doing that, don't let that shake you, or don't let that deter you from answering your questions, because you already know that you know the stuff and you prepared. So just keep answering and doing what you have prepared for.
That is great. And you talked a lot about, preparing and testing your technology, having a backup plan, but do you have any advice, like if something were to go wrong unexpectedly during your interview, your audio goes out or something, about how you can kind of come back or recover from that?
I think in this environment that we're in, everybody is learning. We're all learning things that we didn't think we were going to have to learn, and we have to learn it quickly. So I think most employers are going to have a lot of patience with you. I would always like, I had something happen with a training class one time before, and apologize for, the error, tried to fix the situation. It might be good to have the employer's telephone number. So if something does happen with the audio, if something does happen with the computer system, you have a phone number to actually call someone and get some help from the employer or the person that you're supervising with. So if you can maybe get that ahead of time, that might be just a resource that you have as a backup plan. It's going to happen because, it's technology. So it's going to happen. I just say that we should prepare for it happening.
Absolutely. What are some other questions you recommend asking the interviewer at the end of an interview?
So I would always, the job description, I'm sorry, I keep saying job description. The job posting is like my best friend. The job posting is how I know detailed information about this position that I'm interviewing for. So I'm going to ask them information about the culture. I want to know what type of culture I'm going to be working in. If they don't already tell me, a lot of people will tell you, but if they don't, I'm going to ask about the culture. I'm going to ask about what type of promotional opportunities are there in the company. Because once I get in there, my goal is not to stay in that position. I'm trying to move to other positions. I'm going to ask about what type of performance or evaluations that I have to, or that I will be given as an employee. I'm asking detailed information just because those are the things that are important to me. So if there's something important to you, or there is a perfect job for you and you want these certain things, ask them about it. Because if you're trying to get in a relationship with this employer, then you want to know as much as you possibly can know, so that your expectations are not set too high, their expectations are not set too high, and y'all have a good relationship. So you have to, don't be afraid to ask them questions. Just as they're asking you questions, you should be asking them questions about their company.
All right. And is a cover letter required with every application, or would you send one only when requested?
I would always send one, because I feel like a cover letter is a cheat sheet of the resume. And I forgot, Amanda, I forgot to ask my poll question, so I'm going to ask it now. I would always send a cover letter. So the cover letter can explain, let's say if you have a gap in your employment, let's say if you have had multiple jobs in the last year, the cover letter can be the reason why. So it can explain to the employer, hey, I had family issues, or I had something going on with my family, so I had to change jobs because I had to take care of a family member that was sick. I have um, I have a spouse that's in the military and we had to move. Or I have a gap in my employment because I took off time from employment, from working, because I had young children. So a resume is not going to tell that information, but your cover letter can tell that information. So I would always use a cover letter just as an introduction of, one, what you're looking for, what you're trying to accomplish by applying for that job, and then also to explain any type of discrepancies or anything that you want to explain to make sure that that employer knows. So I had a poll question. I hope that answers the question, but if not, I can go back to it. But I had a poll question that kind of relates to this. I wanted to see what the thought process was as far as when somebody applies for a job, what you guys think as the number of applicants employers will receive. So if there's a customer service position and it's with a local government agency here in Charleston, and the work hours are 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, the salary is above $30,000. How many applications do you think that that employer would get for that type of position? So the answers that you have to choose from is 100, 250, 500, or 1,000. So if it's a customer service representative position, again, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, salary is above 30,000, great benefits, state retirement, local government job. There's one position for a customer service rep. How many actual applications do you think that that employer may get for that job?
It looks like the voting is between 250 or 500 applications.
Okay, very good. So 500. So at one of my past employers, we would normally have a customer service representative position, maybe like once a year. And 500 was the average. So 500 is a lot of applications to go through. And most recruiters or most managers who are looking at resumes or applications, they're going to look at it like 5 to 7 seconds. That's it. So you only have 5 to 7 seconds to make that good impression. And so that means you need to have no grammar mistakes. It needs to tell your skills. It needs to be laid out perfectly almost in order for you to make sure that you're actually going to be one of the candidates that are chosen for the interview. So 500 is a lot, but right now during the times that we're in, they're probably getting 1,000 applicants if they post those jobs. So just as you're applying for jobs, think about that and think about on the other end how many other applicants that you're going to have to actually be better than or beat out in order to get that interview. And then once you do get that interview, think about, celebrate yourself for getting it, because you had to make sure that you were shining and highlight yourself enough in order to actually get that interview.
We have another question that came in pertaining to social media, which I think is a really good question, since most of us have some presence on social media. So the question is, should you put your social media on private during your job search process?
Most employers are going to look at your social media. So I would definitely encourage you to put it on private, especially if you have inappropriate things. I won't even go into that. But I would say if you are somebody that posts a lot of inappropriate things, they may be able to see it if it's not on private. Also, they may just go and look at your Facebook profile or your Facebook page and look at your profile picture. And if your profile picture is you with a bunch of money in your hand, it's not the best look. Also, be careful with your email addresses and the type of email addresses that you share. It should be something professional, like your name or something like that. But a lot of people have like nicknames and things like that. Create an email address just for your jobs is a good tip for you. But I would say you would want to put it on private, because not necessarily is it appropriate all the time, but sometimes employers will go out and look at your profile information. And so that's why I said at the beginning, you should check out theirs, because you want to know what type of person you're going to work for, because they're going to be checking yours.
That's great advice. And we have One final question as we're closing in on our time this morning, but it's from the perspective of an employer. So can you speak about what employers should do to set themselves up for successful virtual interviews?
So I think what employers can do is they can, again, prepare also because of the technology information that I shared. You want to make sure that your technology is working and that it's working properly as you are presenting the information or asking the questions. So making sure that technology is set up properly. Also making sure that you are prepared and you're aware of what questions not to ask, what not to ask the interviewee. A lot of people who are interviewers, they are asked to interview, but they're not aware of some of the things that you need to stay away from. So sometimes when you're just doing small talk and you're trying to make the person comfortable, interviewers will ask, well, where did you go to high school? Well, where are you from? And those questions could be discriminatory and they could sometimes cause a bias. So you don't want to ask questions like that. So as you're virtually interviewing, it's also important that as you're trying to make the person feel comfortable for the process, that you maybe have a script that you follow in order to start the process off or start the conversation. You don't want to get into questions that are prohibited during the interview as an interviewer. So those are just some of my thoughts that I think that will prepare the employer to actually get set for the virtual interview. And the same thing that I would say to the interviewee is the body language, showing that they're happy to be there. That's going to help the person that's interviewing just be more comfortable as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to switch screens here for a second, so bear with me as we finish up our presentation for today. And again, we want to thank everyone for joining us and for submitting such great questions to Finisha. We will follow up with, as I mentioned, a recording of this session as well as Finisha's information should you want to follow up with her directly. And just stay tuned for future webinar sessions on our website. And as I close this session today, we will ask you to complete a brief survey just to let us know what you thought about the session today. So again, we'll give you a few minutes back of your time, but we hope that you enjoyed the session. I know I did, and I learned a lot of information from you, Finisha. So thank you so much for your time this morning to present all of this wonderful information as we are all still navigating this virtual world that we're living in the majority of our time. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.